Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the first policy dialogue entitled Trends in the Global Economy and International Trade and Finance. I am pleased to welcome our distinguished panelists, Mr. Zhenmin, Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. Mukhisa Kituyi, Secretary General of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, Ms. Alicia Bárcena, Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean and current Coordinator of the United Nations Regional Commissions, Mr. Masamichi, Deputy Secretary General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Mr. Bjorn, Gillsater, Special Representative of the World Bank Group to the United Nations, Mr. David Robinson, Deputy Director of the African Department at the International Monetary Fund, and Mr. Robert Te, Chief of Section Economic Research and Statistics at the World Trade Organization. I am also pleased to welcome Mr. Shank, Communications Director at the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance and Urban Sustainability Directors Network, who will moderate the policy dialogues this morning. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, before proceeding further, allow me to mention briefly the modalities that will guide these dialogues. We shall first hear the presentations by our panelists. Thereafter, the floor will be open for comments, observations, and questions. To ensure a wider and dynamic participation, panelists are encouraged to keep their presentations within the time limit of 5 minutes. Having said that, I now hand the meeting over to the moderator, Mr. Shank, to begin the discussion, and I look forward to a productive and interactive exchange of views.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning. Okay, so I just traveled about 7 hours to get here this morning with many delays. I just arrived, and I'm so thankful to the ECOSOC team for their incredible patience. Numerous delays from flights to trains to automobiles. I think there's a poem in there or a song in there somewhere, but I'm thrilled to be here. So where are we headed? Today, hopefully we'll dig into some of that, but I want to set the stage very quickly of where we are now. So if anyone's read the World Inequality Report 2018, any guesses on what it says? Inequality is on the rise, yes. Sorry, there's a weird call and response because it's a negative, but you were like, rise. And yeah. So inequality is on the rise globally in almost every region and in almost every country. The Global Peace Index 2018 said what? It's okay if you haven't read it, but you should read it. It's a good document. That we're less peaceful now than any time in the last decade. And the SDG Index 2018 said what? That countries are not on track to meet the SDGs 2030. Surprise, surprise, shocker, I know. 17 of the last 18 years have broken records in terms of heat. Ever since record began in the mid-1800s, we are now, since 2001, breaking records constantly in terms of heat. Anyone who's experienced the extreme weather knows that we're breaking records across all fronts: heat waves, droughts, floods, sea level rise, etc. Vector-borne illnesses have taken some of my horses up in Vermont. Killed one a month ago. It was devastating. Almost took my second horse. I have rescue horses. So we're seeing climate change impacting us here and now, and the trends aren't good. So where are we headed? First look is, where are we now? And if inequality is rising, if peace is decreasing, and if countries are not on track to reach the SDGs by 2030, we have a serious problem. So I'm going to pull out a English idiom saying that we need to pull out all the stops. That's a musical phrase. If you play the organ, you know what I'm talking about. Most people here, I bet no one plays the organ in this room. If you do, I'd be very impressed. And you pull out all the stops to make the organ as loud as possible. I say that because I'm feeling a little desperate seeing extreme weather in Vermont, where my rescue farm is, killing my horses, seeing temperatures in Vermont that even locals are like, wow, this is too hot. Being on the phone with my cities, because I work for the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance and the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. These are cities all around the world that are on the vanguard of climate leadership. And on a phone call this week, everyone is saying, it's hot, it's hot, it's hot. We haven't had rain in weeks. It's hotter than normal. We're breaking records. This is a problem. So when I have this conversation here in this room today, and I think about where we headed, I'm very keen for us to think about going above and beyond where we're comfortable, doing more than we've ever done before. My cities are now thinking about things like behavior change communication because they realize that just enacting policy isn't sufficient. So they're jumping into behavior change work, they're jumping into marketing like they've never done before, and climate communications, sustainability communications like they've never done before. That's incumbent upon all of us to go above and beyond where we're comfortable, because these rates aren't good, the trends aren't good, and if we want to be somewhere different, somewhere positive, somewhere constructive, somewhere better in 2030, we're all going to have to go above and beyond the normal. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our incredible panel. As you see, there are many up here. So my job is hopefully keep us on track with 5-minute presentations, and then I'm going to ask them questions before we move on to the next panelists so we can begin the interactive conversation immediately. And then hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A with you. So with that, given that Mr. Liu already presented, thank you for your presentation, we're going to begin with Mr. Kituyi, Secretary General with UNCTAD. And if you need a mic, yep, you're good.